Welcome to TNT Episode 4. Today's topic, The Chronicles of Narnia, Book 1.
Book 1, which do you mean? The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or The Magician's Nephew?
Well, the one that everyone knows is Book 1. Of course. You know which one that is, right?
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
No, not that Book 1. The actual Book 1.
The other Book 1.
The Magician's Nephew. The Magician's Nephew actually is the first book according to the Narnia chronology.
The official Narnia chronology.
The official Narnia chronology. The Magician's Nephew is Book 1.
Even though it clearly says Book 6 right on the side.
Now, you might be wondering, why does this say Book 1 and this say Book 6? Well, this is the chronological order of the books as to when they took place in Narnia's history, and this is the published order of the books. This was the sixth one that C.S. Lewis published.
Mm-hmm. Making it very confusing for people coming to the series, like myself.
So the question is, which one did C.S. Lewis think was the right order to read the books in?
And actually, we have some input by him on that, don't we?
Yes, we do. So C.S. Lewis actually wrote to a boy named Lawrence about the orders of the Chronicles of Narnia. Lawrence apparently was having a disagreement with his mother.
As is often the case.
And the mother said you should read them in the order that they were actually written, the published order.
I'm on the side of the mother.
Really?
Yes,
You're on the
I
mom's
am.
side. Well, I'm glad I'm on the boy's side, because I want you to listen.
That's what we mean by a balanced opinion. We have one person vehemently disagreeing with another person.
Right.
It balances out.
So the boy thought you should read them in the order of chronology, and this is what C.S. Lewis wrote in response. I think I agree with your order, that is chronological, for reading the books more than with your mother's. The series was not planned beforehand, as she thinks. When I wrote The Lion, I did not know I was going to write any more. Then I wrote Prince Caspian as a sequel, and still didn't think there would be any more. And when I had done The Voyage, I felt quite sure it would be the last. But I found as I was wrong, so perhaps it does not matter very much in which order anyone read them. I'm not even sure that all the others were written in the same order in which they were published. So, based on what C.S. Lewis is saying there, that really doesn't clear it up. He does say that he kind of agrees with the boy reading the chronological, but then at the end he says he's not even sure the others were written in the same order in which they were published. That gets a little confusing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I guess it doesn't really matter what order you read them in, as long as you have the Narnia chronology to straighten everything out.
You can just read them all and then figure out where everything falls into place afterwards. It might be a little confusing while you're reading them, but you'll get in the same place in the end.
All that to say, we are going to start with the chronological first book, which is...
Because there's no Narnia publishy, there's just a Narnia chronology, so that kind of straightens things out for us.
So, to make it easy, obviously we've made it very easy, we're going to start with The Magician's Nephew. The Magician's Nephew is a very important book in the Narnia series because it's the book of origins. It tells how everything in the world of Narnia got started. And we want to give a little bit of a overview as to what the book actually talks about, for those of you who are unfamiliar. But we don't want to give away too much, because we want you, after this, to go and read the book.
And not have everything spoiled for you.
So, what basically is the background of how Narnia got started?
Well, the book starts out telling of a little English boy named Diggory, and...
Not Didgery, as I
Didgery.
falsely pronounced it before. Diggory. Official English pronunciation.
A little boy named Diggory and his friend Polly, who are...
Not Polly.
Not Polly.
Gotta get these names pronounced right.
Diggory and his mother are staying with Diggory's uncle and aunt, while Diggory's mother is very sick. And so Diggory befriends his neighbor Polly, and they have some random British adventures exploring broken down houses and that kind of a thing, until one day when they accidentally come across Diggory's Uncle Andrew's secret study.
Uncle Andrew tricks them into using some magic rings that he has, into entering another world. And they end up going to a few different worlds, but ultimately end up in the world of Narnia, and we actually get to witness Narnia being created.
Don't forget the introduction of the witch.
Ah, I kind of skipped over that, sorry.
Yeah, they enter the world of Charn before they enter Narnia, which is an old and dying world where really the only living creature on the entire world is this woman named Jadis, who kind of tags along with the children.
I think it's Jadis, but we like to argue about pronunciation, so you can call her whatever you want, but I call her Jadis, he calls her Jadis. We're very balanced. Anyway.
Yes,
Jadis...
we disagree so much, we're very balanced. She tags along with the children and finds herself weakened in the kind of world between the worlds, but upon following them to Earth, finds herself very strong and really reveals she's a very nasty woman who kind of wants to take over the whole world. So then the children try to take her back to her world and find themselves in a completely empty world.
And that world actually is the world of Narnia, which is just freshly being created. It's being created by a lion. And that lion, if you know the stories, is called Aslan.
We both agree on how that's supposed to be pronounced.
Some people pronounce it Aslan.
But we actually Aslan, which I don't even like. That's how I was first heard it said when somebody read it to me.
We're American though, so we're probably really pronouncing everything wrong.
Most likely,
according to C.S. Lewis and people from that part of the world. So
C.S. Lewis probably wouldn't have even been able to understand if we were trying to read it aloud. Be like, what strange language is this that they're just speaking?
They've ruined
it hurts my ears.
They've completely ruined my stories with their American English. They probably use American English Bible translations too, because those are particularly bad translations. Yeah. So what we want to do now is look at this story in a little bit more detail and analyze it a little bit, give a review. And what we want to start with is comparing C.S. Lewis's origin and creation story with other creation stories. So, Taylor, you told me that this story of Narnia's creation has a little bit of parallel with the author J.R.R. Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings and his world. And they were actually friends.
Yeah, as we mentioned last week, they were part of the same literary group.
The Inklings.
Yes, the Inklings. They were the same literary group. And actually, the Lord of the Rings books and the Chronicles of Narnia books were published around the same time. I think the Lord of the Rings books started to be written a bit earlier, but
yeah, they were both published right in the 50s, right around that time. Yeah, the 1950s.
I think two of the books were actually published the same year. Horse and His Boy, and I don't remember, maybe The Two Towers, but in any case, they have a lot of things in common, probably a lot of inside jokes between the two, because they're pretty good friends, but the creation stories especially are similar in a couple ways. First, in Narnia, it's Aslan, the son of the Emperor over the sea, basically a Christ figure, a very obvious Christ figure, sings the world into being. It's his song that literally makes the trees come up and the posies come up and his voice rings out and makes the stars sing. And in the Ainu Lindale, which is the creation story of Middle Earth, you don't have an obvious Christ figure like you do in Narnia, but you have the Ainur, the children of Iluvatar, the angels basically. They're given the task of singing the world into being by God. So they kind of collectively share the role of angels and collectively a Christ figure kind of in the cosmology of Middle Earth. So they sing the world into being, and actually there's a passage I'd like to briefly read here that from the Ainu Lindale that tells the process that they go about doing it. Then the voices of the Ainur, like unto harps and lutes, and pipes and trumpets, and viols and organs, and like unto countless choirs singing with words, began to fashion the theme of Iluvatar to a great music. And a sound arose of endless interchanging melodies woven in harmony that passed beyond hearing, into the depths and into the heights. and the places of the dwelling of Iluvatar were filled to overflowing, and the music and the echo of the music went out into the void, and it was not void. Which kind of paints the picture, you know, when they first come to Narnia, it's all black, and then the stars begin to sing, and then things kind of come into being, so you really get the same kind of imagery there.
It's darkness and void into the creation of everything coming into existence.
And that not only obviously draws parallels between them as friends, but they both kind of took from the same source material, which was the creation story of the Bible. And could you talk a little bit about that?
In C.S. Lewis's Narnia account, you've got Aslan speaking, or actually singing, everything into existence. And he's actually called the son of the emperor, isn't it? The
son of the emperor over the sea.
Thank you. So he's the son, and it's interesting because in the Bible, it actually talks about Jesus, the Son of God, speaking everything into existence. He's the means by which everything came into existence. And both in the Bible and Narnia story, it's by the creation of God's voice. And also you get that imagery of things being, especially animals, coming into existence out of the ground.
In The Magician's Nephew, the children see big piles of earth, like big ant hills, that break and the animals come out. It's even, like, it really, there's a lot of detail that goes into it. It's described as dogs, like, crawling through a hedge. And the stags, when they came up, it looked like trees at first because all you saw were their antlers. And there's really a lot of detail that goes into that description.
A lot of beautiful imagery. But it reminds you of what the Bible says about God forming everything out of the ground. So there's a lot of parallels with the biblical account of creation, which really brings us into an important understanding of C.S. Lewis and how he viewed the world. He did view the biblical account as giving a reality that the world came into existence, our world came into existence by the power of God. But that leads to a question, was C.S. Lewis a pure creationist, as in like a young earth creationist who believed everything was created in 6 literal days? Or was C.S. Lewis an evolutionist? Would he have been someone who would have believed in evolution?
Remember, he was an atheist for quite a while, and he really embraced evolution as an atheist. He didn't give it a second thought. It just made sense to him.
And I think he retained a lot of those evolutionary beliefs all through his life. However, you can actually read that he was somewhat critical, especially of naturalistic evolution.
He was definitely a theistic evolutionist.
Absolutely. If he still held on to a lot of evolutionary belief, he always explained it in terms of God bringing the whole process about. So it's really hard to say exactly what he thought on those issues. I tend to think from what I've read that he did incorporate evolution into his beliefs, but he definitely believed that God was the one creating everything and guiding everything.
You can see in the story, Aslan, he brings up the animals out of the earth, and then he goes and he breathes life into some of them, and they become intelligent and follow him.
So he would even believe that even if evolution took place, God at a certain point is giving humans, for example, their unique rationality and ability to be something unique in God's order.
Because that's a common idea in modern theistic evolution, that some kind of ape-like creature evolved to a certain point, and then God breathed life into that, and that's what became people.
Gave them that rationality and gave them that spirit of God awareness.
Now, we can see in the Narnia story there is a pretty big departure from the biblical account, that there isn't really a Satan figure like there is in Genesis.
Yeah, kind of yes, kind of no. It's, I think, debated as to whether the witch really represents Satan, and you tend to see her as representing more evil.
See her as the incarnation of sin, and definitely Narnia is not just black and white. Take the story from the Bible. I'm sure there's elements of both in her. I just tend to see her more as sin than Satan. We don't really get any kind of a picture that she ever really was, like, she didn't have the same role. She was, it seems like, always this cruel, tyrannical overlord of her own world.
She's in some ways very much a human kind of a character, but she has this evil
Mm-hmm.
quality to her, and that evil is actually introduced into the world of Narnia, as you mentioned earlier, through Diggory and through the circumstances that led them into Narnia. He ultimately has a hand in bringing the presence of evil into
Mm-hmm.
Narnia, and that's a parallel with the Christian story of, we don't know exactly how Satan enters into the earth and everything and becomes part of that original story, but we know he's present,
Mm-hmm.
and he is embodied in the form of a serpent and tempts Eve.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting because even the witch does a little bit of tempting
She
in
does.
this story.
And it's even at a place which kind of draws parallels in the imagery from Genesis story. So
There are trees
yeah,
and temptation to eat fruit.
the location where the trees are, the grove enclosed with the gate, it is really similar and evokes the imagery that we kind of traditionally use for the Garden of Eden, some kind of
Right.
enclosed.
It's similar to what you see in the Bible with the garden, and there's a tree of life, and there's a tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Bible story. So so Diggory actually has to take this fruit back to Aslan. That's his mission, and that's a big part of the story as you get into it. Diggory has to take the fruit back to Aslan, and the witch tempts him to take the fruit and eat of it. And at first he's attempted to eat himself, but then she kind of twists that temptation into another idea.
Mm-hmm.
And what does she try to get him to do?
She feeds off of his good desire to help his mother,
Yeah.
and kind of says, "You could use this fruit to help your mother. No, don't worry about what Aslan said. He's just selfish. He doesn't want you to help your mother." And so that she's kind of poking at a very noble desire,
Yep.
kind of like you see in Milton's Paradise Lost. The desire for knowledge is this kind of noble goal that's upheld, that Satan's striving for, and presents it as a noble goal to Eve. And so while you don't quite exactly get the same kind of thing necessarily in the Genesis account, it seems like that could be another parallel that he was going for. So it's the witch is poking him towards this noble goal, and so that really tempts him even more than just the selfish desire to eat it for himself.
I find this whole idea of temptation to spoil the goodness of everything being perfect is a recurring theme with C.S. Lewis, because in his space trilogy, in the second book, there's also that temptation to listen to the evil temptation, and ultimately, so he's replaying in his literary works the original temptation of the Genesis account, and in his books, I notice you have a good ending, much more of a good ending, whereas in the Bible story, it's a bad ending. So he's really theorizing.
I think he kind of shares a little bit with Milton the kind of biblical humanist kind of view, you might say. He, not like man's the center of the universe, but man
has a choice.
Man has a choice,
sure.
And man is capable of making the right choice, which really puts even more responsibility on mankind for making that choice.
And I would like to add and say that from a traditional Christian theological perspective, of course, a lot of these things are debated, but humans are said in their innocent state to have had a real choice that they could have gone either way, because they didn't have sin already as part of their nature, and hadn't entered into their own entity as to who they are. So they had a real free choice at the beginning.
You have people arguing, well, God knew that it was human nature that they were gonna sin eventually. He was just dangling in front of their faces, but that wasn't human nature at the time.
They were completely innocent, and that's why it's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because if they ate of it, they would have understood evil, but in a way that was no longer good. They would have experienced evil in a very real way, which they ended up doing. But not in C.S. Lewis's story.
Not in C.S. Lewis's story.
Diggory ends up making the right choice. And that's really interesting, because when Diggory decides not to bring the apple to his mother, Aslan ultimately commends him for that and gives him the answer as to why that was a really good choice that he made. What does he say to him about if he had eaten the apple, what would have happened? Versus
if he had eaten the apple, he would have lived forever, which was what the witch told him, but it would be a really tormented existence because he would have to live with that
misery and the guilt,
knowing that he wasn't able to do what he was supposed to do. And see, the witch eats one of the apples, and
she lives forever, he says, but in a very miserable condition.
You even see her, we'll go into later, she's the major antagonist of the next book, and she's even in the same but different state in the next book because of all this time has passed, and she's just really become even more cold and bitter than what she already is here. So Diggory can't see that that would have happened,
but he finds that out because Aslan explains it to him. He says that the nature of the fruit is what it is. It'll make you live forever, but you have to do things in the right order, in the right way. You have to use things in the right way. Well, that's interesting what you said, because it reminds me of something in the Bible that I'd like to read, where after Adam and Eve take the fruit at the wrong time in the Bible, the scripture says, "The Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life." So there you have it. God is actually saying, I don't want them to eat the tree of life and live forever in this miserable state.
People so often say, oh, God knew that they would become as great as him if they ate the fruit, but while obviously C.S. Lewis didn't write the Bible, he was writing a story. I think it's a
From his Christian perspective.
I think it's a very interesting way of looking at it that most people don't even consider, that it was for their sake that God didn't let them just live eternally in, like, they must have been miserable. Like, they lived in the Garden of Eden, and then they know that it was completely because of their fault that they were kicked out, and then all these...
So it was really, in a sense, God's mercy that he would allow them to ultimately die, but give the promise of new life, renewed life one day, where they could be resurrected in perfection again. So this really gives you a little philosophical musing on how things could have been for Adam and Eve, and how C.S. looked at it. Well, I'd like to now think about one other parallel, and that's Adam and Eve in the Bible story are given the task of ruling over God's creation. Humans are seen as being very unique in the created order. And again, we see that in C.S. Lewis's writing in this story, because there is a man and a woman who end up being, they're brought to Narnia, and their names again are
Helen and Frank?
That's right, Frank and Helen. And
very
you got
down
the pronunciation right. We
We
even agree on the pronunciation. Frank and Helen. Were they American?
I don't believe so.
No, they weren't. They weren't. But they are given the task of ruling Narnia as king and queen, and to take care of that whole land. And I think that's a great parallel, again, of what we see given to us as human beings are told in the Bible to take care of God's creation.
Helen and Frank were farmers, so they came to it with a perspective of taking care of animals and the earth. That's
right. Not ruling just, with a rod
right.
and just dictating everything, but giving order and care to things.
Which is something that you see carried on through the royal lineage of Narnia. Over the course of the books, the rulers are very kind to their subjects. It kind of does turn into more of a traditional fairy tale monarchy kind of thing, but they...
Well, he was English, so he was kind of drawing from that.
They have a view that their subjects are important and that they're to take care of them more than just using them. And while we're on the subject, actually, and that's another parallel to the Middle Earth books, is in Middle Earth, the humans are directly the children of Iluvatar like the Ainur are. Like, you see, most of the races and animals of Middle-earth were created by the Ainur, like the angels, so they have a even lower tier of creation, but the humans were created by Iluvatar and put on the earth as almost like brothers to the Ainur. They're not, the angels are not above the humans, and of the races of Middle-earth, the humans have a unique destiny to them. They're very special. Their ultimate role is to be with God forever, which even you see that over the course of
So you get both in Tolkien and C.S. Lewis this idea that there's all different kinds of created beings, but humans
are special.
They're not necessarily the most powerful, but they have a unique place in the order of all things.
So next week we're going to be discussing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Can you give us a little brief overview of how this ties into that book?
Well, you wouldn't really know how everything came to be without The Magician's Nephew. So that's one reason. But also, he gives a little interesting tidbit of history. There's this particular item that you see in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that is very central to the imagery of the story, and it's a lamppost. And actually, that lamppost in Narnia comes from the story of The Magician's Nephew. It's actually brought from Earth, so to speak. And how exactly does the lamppost appear in Narnia?
As I mentioned earlier, the witch had very crazy strength in on Earth. It's actually kind of a little bit like
she got to actually enter Earth for a little while, and that was pretty funny when she was walking around in London.
It kind of reminds you of Superman almost. He has his own world that he comes from where he's normal, and then he goes to Earth and he's super strong. Well, the witch is like that. She rips an iron bar off a lamppost.
Except she's a woman and she's bad.
Yeah.
But other than that,
it's just like Superman. And so she takes the iron bar with her when she is taken from Earth and brought into Narnia, and she hears Aslan singing, and it absolutely enrages her because, well, it's not explicitly stated, it's pretty obvious. She hates Aslan. She's got to know what's going on. She was like the most powerful sorceress of her planet. She's got to know this is who Aslan is and what he's doing, so it just makes her really mad, and she throws the lamppost, and it just bounces off his head, and he doesn't even care, and that really scares her.
Aslan's just...
and she runs away.
He's a little bit stronger than every other possible person out there.
And I don't think she was really expecting that at all. But the new Earth of Narnia is very, powerful. I guess, magical is really the way you would say it, and for a really short time, whatever you would plant in the ground would grow up magically.
Yeah, even like toffee planted into the ground would grow into a kind of a toffee fruit tree.
Yeah,
which is pretty
interesting.
Cool. Man, that'd be awesome. But yeah, so her iron bar, or whatever it is, the metal bar gets, planted into the ground and ends up growing into this lamppost. And that lamppost is seen in the next story that we're going to look at. So, come back next time, watch us next time as we review Book 2, chronologically, in the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Thanks for watching.
See you next time.